Well, good morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, and we are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. We have a very busy show in store for you this morning. I've got some examples of why it's important that you need to know who you are voting for. We're also going to be talking about Colombia here in just a moment. First, a comment after Friday's program from a viewer saying, you know, Frank, President Trump has the heart of a champion. We are blessed. Thank goodness for him. Thank you very much from that viewer. All right, so Colombia's president, Petro, has buckled under Trump's trade war threat. He reversed course about accepting flights of deported migrants from the U.S. after President Trump threatened emergency tariffs of up to 50% on the South American country for refusing to cooperate. Petro did not only acquiesce to Trump's demand, he even offered up the official Colombian presidential plane to help shuttle the migrants back to the country, calling it a response to, quote, the government's commitment to guarantee decent conditions. The government of Colombia, under the direction of President Gustavo Petro, has arranged a presidential plane to facilitate the dignified return of the compatriots who are going to arrive in the country today in the morning, coming from deportation flights. A translated official statement read in part, in response, the Trump administration announced it would not impose sanctions and tariffs so long as Colombia follows through with its part of the deal. According to statements from the White House press secretary, we're going to talk about that in just a moment because we received a statement late last night from the White House. This was quite a controversy. I forgot, and I should have known, I forgot in a Trump administration that the news does not stop on the weekends. You have to watch at all times. As a matter of fact, did you happen to catch, and we're going to talk about it later, J.D. Vance on CBS on Sunday? Margaret Brennan does an interview and does not even hide her disdain for Vance or Trump, lecturing, and I find that very interesting. Well, you do know one of those type of comments from Margaret. We're going to talk about that. I would love to hear your thoughts if you happen to catch it. I was very excited to see that J.D. Vance would be on because he does such a fantastic job when it comes to dealing with hostile media, and that's exactly what we saw. But this is the statement that was released last night in regards to Colombia. This is from the Office of Communications at the White House. Quote, the government of Colombia has agreed to all of President Trump's terms, including the unrestricted acceptance of all illegal aliens from Colombia returned from the United States, including on U.S. military aircraft, without limitation or delay. Based on this agreement, the fully drafted IEEPA tariffs and sanctions will be held in reserve and not signed. Will be held in reserve and not signed unless Colombia fails to honor the agreement. The visa sanctions issued by the State Department and enhanced inspections from Customs and Border Protection will remain in effect until the first plane load of Colombian deportees is successfully returned. Today's events make clear to the world that America is respected again. President Trump will continue to fiercely protect our nation's sovereignty, and he expects all other nations of the world to fully cooperate in accepting the deportation of their citizens illegally present in the United States. We're going to talk about that specifically, what is being done with these ICE raids. But originally, Colombia's president, Petro, went on kind of an unhinged rant, if you will, in regards to Trump, threatening tariffs himself. If you know anyone stubborn, that's me, he said. Trump, I don't really like traveling to the U.S. It's a bit boring, Petro began his tirade. But I confess that there are some admirable things about the U.S., before stating that he likes going to the black neighborhoods of Washington, where he saw an entire fight in the U.S. Capitol between blacks and Latinos with barricades. What? He continues, I don't like your oil, Trump. You're going to end the human species because of greed. Now, you've got to recall that Petro is a former guerrilla group member. He also then bizarrely invited Trump to have a drink of whiskey with him, so as long as the Colombian president's gastritis isn't acting up. Maybe one day over a drink of whiskey that I accept despite my gastritis, we could talk frankly about this. But it's difficult because you consider me an inferior race, and I am not, nor is any Colombian, Petro said. If you know anyone stubborn, that is me. Petros then suggested that he worries Trump might use his economic strength to enact a coup against him before daring the U.S. president to overthrow him and see how humanity will respond. You could try to carry out a coup with your economic strength and your arrogance, like you did with Allende, but I die in my law, I resist the torture, and I resist you. After all of that unhinged rant, tirade, if you will, he still agreed to all of Trump's terms, according to the White House. Stephen Collinson says, after forcing Colombia to back down, White House claims America is respected again. The president had earlier unveiled swift and painful punishments, including huge tariffs on the U.S. ally, in his most overt attempt yet to make an example of a nation that crossed him and to assert dominance in the Western Hemisphere. The crisis erupted when the Colombian president blocked U.S. military flights. We know all of that. The U.S. president jumped at a chance to show his supporters how tough he can be and to demonstrate to other countries in Latin America the price of resisting migrant repatriations. After hours of tensions, the White House said Colombia had agreed to accept migrant flights, including on military aircraft, and that tariffs would be held off pending its implementation of the deal. Still, the spat with Colombia was also a reminder of how Trump's hardline approach will cause massive global disruption. The U.S. president has already browbeaten Canada and Mexico over border issues, sought to force Denmark to sell Greenland, and threatened to take back the Panama Canal. For years of such tactics could harm U.S. global relations and harden attitudes towards Americans among foreign populations. So already putting some type of blame on President Trump or trying to suggest that he was going to make matters worse on the global scale, which is interesting and it's so fascinating to watch the difference in coverage over the last 4 years where there was essentially no coverage, no questioning of anything the president was doing under the Biden administration, even though we know of the mental decline, we know of some of these disastrous policies that nearly led to World War III. That was not seen in a critical light by the media. But of course, any move that Trump makes will be presented as a negative. And we're seeing that when you saw Margaret Brennan interviewing J.D. Vance, the nastiness that the media still has not learned from. So it comes as no surprise. But it's also worth mentioning that they did not and have not learned their lesson after November. Trump is wielding power all over the map, says Stephen Collinson. Trump's victory over Colombia capped the first week of his presidency, during which he used intimidation as a device to stamp his power on the United States at home and to sharply change the nation's path abroad. On Sunday, for instance, Trump's new administration launched a deportation blitz in Chicago that will spread countrywide in the latest highly visible sign of his desire to quickly get results. White House border czar Tom Homan, and we're going to talk about this in more depth, told CNN that the new multi-agency approach on immigration enforcement was a game changer. Quote, today's operation was all of government. President Trump has put all of government on this issue. Nearly 1,000 people were arrested in the sweep on Sunday, according to Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Did you see that actually, and we'll get into this a little bit later on, but that President Trump, who's not very happy with the recently hired, 90,000 IRS employees, suggesting that he might send them not weaponized, that's not the right word, but send them with weapons to the border to be a part of this immigration reform, if you will. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on. But again, just highlighting what they see as negative, having respect in the world. Now, another intense week looms for Trump, according to CNN, which I think that'll be every week. Trump has hinted that he could be a transformational leader, showing energy and focus and acting quickly to implement his campaign promises, especially on immigration. And that drives them crazy that he's making good on campaign promises, because that's not what a presidential candidate is supposed to do. Look at someone like Harris, who changed and flip-flopped, for lack of a better word, on so many of her core beliefs. And they knew when she got in there, she would flip-flop again, go anti-fracking, etc. So they're not used to a presidential candidate following through on their promises. But his agent of disruption in the Pentagon, Pete Hegseth, was sworn in as Defense Secretary Saturday. Did you watch that? That was a very nice ceremony, I thought. J.D. Vance, the tie-breaking vote, joking that I thought I was done voting in the Senate. I think he may have a lot more of those interactions where he'll have to be the tiebreaker, unfortunately. But Trump has also taken steps that could alienate many of the swing voters who sent him back to power. His blanket pardons of January 6, 2021 rioters, including those convicted of violent offenses, shocked many Republicans, and his decision to strip security details from former aides who criticized him, including several who have been threatened by Iran, revealed an obsession with past grievances. Now, your thoughts on that? I've been seeing some pushback. I think it was Lindsey Graham and others that were pushing back against people like John Bolton losing their security detail. I think that Trump's point that the American taxpayer shouldn't be on the hook for the rest of their life, I think there's a fair point there. And of course, in many instances, these people have out of pocket got their own security details since Donald Trump made that decision. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. But the sudden showdown with Colombia underscores hazards of this immigration purge. Trump's initial response was crushing. He ordered immediate emergency tariffs of 25%. We know all that. There was a travel ban, etc. Trump warned, quote, "These measures are just the beginning. We will not allow the Colombian government to violate its legal obligations with regard to the acceptance and return of the criminals they forced into the United States." Ryan Berg, director of America's program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, said Petros may have had his reason to pick an early fight with Trump, not least amid dissatisfaction with the existing trading relations with the U.S., a longtime military ally. Berg added that Petro might think, quote, he's going to benefit from juxtaposing himself to the United States and being seen as fighting for the dignity of Latin America. Still, long-term tariffs on Colombia from the U.S., its largest trading partner, could be disastrous. Berg predicted that Colombia would have to quietly come to an agreement, which they did. Enough on that. But again, not learning their lesson, and you see the negativity and everything that Trump does in a negative light. We've got a couple examples when we come back, because that was breaking news from overnight. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit, just quickly, about two examples of why it is so important that you know who you vote for. We've talked about this almost ad nauseum on this program, where it is important to go into the voting booth as informed as possible. That's why we try to have as many of the candidates on as we can. If you look at November, we had so many specifically judicial races that we focused on, but we tried to get anybody that wanted to be on the program to come on and tell us their positions, because in a different media landscape than in maybe past years, it becomes increasingly difficult to find out about who you can and cannot vote for, or who you are going to vote for, or who the opponents are. So we're going to give you a couple of kind of offbeat examples of why it is important to know who you're voting for. Because yes, we have a super mayor, Tiffany Henyard update, and then another quick update, and then we're going to get into some more of the nitty gritty from over the weekend. Did you see Vance on CBS's Sunday show? Just the disdain and anger and hate coming from the media at this administration. The lecturing by Margaret Brennan, the lecturing, well, you do know, don't you? I mean, those to think that she knows better than the Vice President of the United States, very telling of what they think of themselves. Well, we're going to talk about that when we come back, but I'm rambling on, so stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us.
Some people who need Social Security disability benefits go to their hearing alone and get turned down. Not every lawyer will appeal a denial after your hearing. I will. I'm Peter Gorton of Lockman & Gorton. I help people win benefits by appealing their denials, including in federal court. But your time to appeal is limited, so call my office now.
Lockman & Gordon, 1-800-698-0567.
Sheldon and Missy face off in
Why can't we watch DuckTales? Because we don't learn anything.
Book Smarts versus Street Smarts.
Is it working? Are you feeling motivated? Very.
It's the battle of twins.
Life is so confusing. I always hoped it would be easier for me when I grew up. It's gonna be all right. You were faking. Bazinga.
Young Sheldon. Weeknights at 6:30 on Big Fox.
Welcome to Frankly Speaking, talking to the people that affect your life, that affect all of our day-to-day lives. This is something you're not going to get anywhere else. We've got a lot to offer. There'll be a lot of news, local, regional, national, really the things that affect you. And I think you'll be glad that you tuned in. So think of it as radio on TV. Frankly Speaking, live, 2 hours long, starting at 6 a.m. on WYDC TV Big Fox. This is history making.
Fox website is here now. WYDCTV.com. Local and national news that keeps you informed and involved. WYDCTV.com. Today's weather, up to date and in your town. WYDCTV.com. Sports news, local events, and health stories that affect you. WYDCTV.com. The Big Fox website. Your news here now. WYDCTV.com.
The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio. Let's go through some viewer comments this morning. Good morning, Frank. Well, hey, good morning. I see Colombia buckled to Trump and is now taking all illegal aliens back. Yes, absolutely. Did you see where Trump fired a bunch of government officials or watchdogs? Yes, he did. I don't have that right in front of me, but it was a sizable amount of, I don't know what you would call it. I guess watchdog is probably appropriate. We will get to that a little bit later on because I just don't have it right in front of me, even though I should have been better prepared, but I just read yours right before we were going on the air. Oh yeah, fires more than a dozen independent inspector generals. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. Next, a comment from a different viewer. Good morning, Frank. Well, hey, good morning. Off subject, but deserves attention. How many times will people witness the NFL Kansas City Chiefs games be rigged for the Chiefs? The refs allowed taunting by Kelvin. Overhead view shows Josh Allen did reach out over what would have been a first down by inches. Buffalo looked like they intercepted the ball, only to have the ball hit the ground. But reception was awarded to Kansas City. There was more, but eventually it is beyond disturbing. NFL might as well be grouped with the legacy media. Yes, I know a lot of people upset over the Bills' loss yesterday, and rightfully so, exactly what you were pointing out to. It's never good when the headline reads controversial call decides game, but that's exactly what happened. So I appreciate your point that the NFL might as well be grouped with the legacy media, and I know there is a lot of outrage, and rightfully so, over yesterday's game. So thank you very much. Okay, here we go. Tiffany Henyard is back in the news. The scandal-plagued super mayor, self-described super mayor. We've talked about her a lot in the past. This is an example of why you should know who you voted for. She has allegedly drained the coffers. She has spent a lot of money on parties, Amazon purchases, kind of what has been deemed as propaganda posters to promote herself. Well, she has reportedly been found in contempt of court after allegedly stonewalling liquor licenses for months. The owner of St. Patrick's, a 3-story restaurant and banquet hall on Lincoln Avenue, sued in August, claiming the mayor had repeatedly promised to sign the liquor license, which were already approved by the village board of trustees, but she never did. In court on Wednesday, Henyard, who also serves as the village liquor commissioner, man, she's got a lot of titles, reportedly vowed again that she'd sign the licenses, but she did not before a 5 p.m. Thursday deadline. The parties were therefore forced to return to court again, and Henyard arrived a half an hour late for the hearing. Again, keep in mind, this is all costing taxpayers untold amounts of money in lawyer fees. And why? What is the end game? Why not sign those liquor licenses? Cook County Judge Cecilia Horan held Henyard in indirect criminal contempt. That means the mayor was considered, quote, disrespectful to the authority of the court. It's been a challenge, to put it mildly. It shouldn't be so difficult. This is an ordinary event to get liquor licenses issued, said the owner of that bar restaurant. The judge asked the mayor, will you sign these licenses? And instead of signing them or answering the judge directly, she began talking in circles. And so that's when the judge made one determination of what's called indirect criminal contempt, adding, it's serious. It's not something anybody would want to happen, especially if you're a public official. Henyard was not taken into custody, but under threat of being held in contempt, again, she signed 2 of the 3 liquor licenses, meaning St. Patrick's can finally open for business. I wonder if it was one of those scenarios, because we heard that she was strong-arming some businesses for donations to her campaign or donations to her charity. I wonder if it boils down to that. This should have been over in November, Tiffany Camara, one of the owners of the bar, said. The client is pursuing the third license as well as additional consequences for the mayor over the holdup. Quote, we want her to be fined, we want her to pay attorney fees, and we want damages. She has hurt my client. We are wasting money every day, taxpayer money. This is a nice building that people could be using, and not to mention the jobs that come with it. Henyard's attorney, Max Solomon, said it's very important for people to understand that the document signed today had another entity on there that was a holdup. That was the only thing. Well, she's back in the news. She doesn't stay quiet, that's for sure. We know she's running for re-election this year, so I'm sure we'll have much more on the world's super mayor, or whatever she calls herself, world's greatest mayor. Another example of why it's important to know who you vote for and the rules that they are enforcing. A national RV dealer is in hot water for flying a mammoth American flag at one of its lots. And the company's CEO, Marcus Lemonis, says that this one isn't coming down. He has 250 RV dealerships across the country, and they raised a gigantic flag at his Greenville, North Carolina location in October. Local zoning officials said the stars and stripes fluttering over the RV Supercenter is 15 times bigger than allowed. Even the 120-foot flagpole is too big, coming in at nearly twice the height permitted by local law. The city started fining the company on Wednesday, and the penalties are racking up quickly. As of Friday, there have already been 6 violations that will cost about $1,150 in fines. Lemonis, again the owner, said it doesn't matter because Old Glory is going nowhere. The flag is not coming down. You can find me all you want, city of Greenville, North Carolina. No American flag is too big. Now, this is not the first time they've gone to battle over local zoning laws. In August, the dealership outside of Stockton, California, demanded the firm take down a similarly huge banner over worries the flagpole could fall over. Lemonis was just as obstinate then, ordering the dealer to keep it up. Quote, if we felt like we were putting people in danger or causing any issues with air traffic, which would absolutely not be okay, then I wouldn't do it. They later gave the dealership the green light to keep the flag flying. No one wants to be on the wrong side of the American flag. So this is why it is important to know who you're voting for, that zoning board being appointed most likely by the local town or city council. If a person fails to pay the civil penalty within 72 hours, the city may recover the penalty together with all the costs of filing a civil action in the General Court of Justice in the nature of a suit to collect the debt. City officials told the company they would write tickets every day the flag flies, and the flagpole must also be pulled out. So far, the city hasn't gone to court to collect the fines. During the spat over the California flag last year, the Lebanon-born entrepreneur said the big banners are symbolizing about how we feel about this country. I happen to be an immigrant. I was given the blessing of being able to enter the country and become a citizen, and I'm grateful for it. Such expressions of patriotism, quote, have been part of my life since I was a little child down in Miami, Florida, where we have the largest flagpole in Miami at our car dealership. So there you go. We got a couple New York State issues. Speaking of knowing who you're voting for, we're going to get to a couple New York State issues, then we're going to get into the federal level, some of the things that Trump is doing. Vance, of course, on CBS's Sunday show. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. He did a great job, in my opinion, but you can see the anger and the dislike for him by the anchor, by the host, the interviewer. Also, what did you think as this viewer who sent in earlier, not happy with the Bills officiating in that game? Get your thoughts on that as well. So stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, please stay with us.
If you or a loved one regularly used hair relaxers or straighteners and were diagnosed with uterine, ovarian, or endometrial cancer, you may be entitled to significant financial compensation.
I've used hair relaxers for years. I had no idea they could cause cancer.
Chemical hair relaxers and straighteners have been linked to serious conditions, including several types of cancer. If you used hair relaxers and have been diagnosed with uterine, ovarian, or endometrial cancer, call us now. There's no fee unless we win your case. Call today.
Frankly Speaking Roof Cam is brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact Boss Security for all your business and home security needs.
It's the best 2 hours of NFL coverage, starting with Fox NFL Kickoff at 11.
This is great TV.
It is caught.
Then at noon, take it to the next level on Fox NFL Sunday.
This kid has it all.
Touchdown! America's #1 pregame show. The best NFL pregame shows are back-to-back, only on Fox.
Something with a diamond in it.
Diamondback rattlesnake.
It's in the name. Name a low-calorie food you might make your edible underwear out of.
Salmon.
Watch it weeknights. Share it the next day.
Wild caught Norwegian teriyaki.
Share in the fun. Weeknights on Family Feud.
7 and 7:30 on Big Fox.
It's a season of sharing.
Having a good time has always been my #1 goal. I tend to get crazy. At my age, I should not be jumping up and down like that. And if you don't know what I mean, ask your mama. The young ones, y'all like, we don't know what you're talking about. But I promise you, in 30 years, you will.
It's the best time in daytime.
Weekdays at 2 p.m. on Big Fox.
The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Comment from a viewer. Good morning, Frank. Well, hey, good morning. The Bills' loss is once again disappointing, and the controversial calls are once again a talking point. The Bills need to take a tip from the Trump playbook and make it too big to rig. Thank you very much. That's a very good point. Thank you very much. I couldn't agree more. So let's talk about New York State issues as we talk about how important it is to know who you are voting for. Albany's rainmakers have found a new way to shower cash into the state's dwindling coffers. The day after Christmas, as you may recall, Governor Hochul signed into law the Climate Change Super Fund. We've talked about this a lot with Assemblyman Palmisano and just in general on this program. Deputizing the Department of Environmental Conservation to fine fossil fuel companies billions of dollars for past greenhouse gas emissions. Now, keep in mind, these fossil fuel companies were doing everything they were told to do following the permitting process and then after the fact. And think of the message this sends to businesses contemplating coming to New York. Well, you did everything right, but now we are going to fine you billions of dollars. The money will go into a climate change slush or super fund that will be used ostensibly to prepare for and manage adverse weather events like floods. This coming from Jordan McGillis. Sponsored by 5 Senate Democrats and following on the heels of a law Vermont passed last year, the Climate Change Super Fund will retroactively levy a fee on firms that, quote, engaged in the trade or business of extracting fossil fuel or refining crude oil during a covered period from January 1st of 2000 to December 31st of 2018 that exceeded 1 billion metric tons of emissions and that sold their product into the Empire State. Big foreign producers like China, National Petroleum Company, and Rosneft needn't worry. The scheme sets a target of $75 billion to be collected from such firms over a 25-year period. From the arbitrary dollar starting point, the scheme will portion a cost recovery demand to the big American energy players that constitutes the responsible parties based on their historic emission tallies. Where will the money go, you ask? As Manhattan Institute legal fellow and city's director John Ketchum has pointed out, the fund will dole out cash to well-connected trade unions working on infrastructure projects, disadvantaged communities, and special interest groups under a system of poorly defined preferentialism. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. The new scheme styles itself in the fashion of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's 1980 Superfund law, but bears little resemblance to that law in reality. The EPA Superfund holds polluters liable for the direct environmental damage they have caused by releasing hazardous waste, harms that are specified, local, particular, and attributable. The Climate Superfund idea simply slaps retroactive fees onto a group of companies that sold products the state no longer views favorably. And that's why I mentioned this over and over again. Think of the message this sends to business, because your business may be fine now, but what if it goes out of fashion and the governor looks for a blank check, essentially? While in aggregate, global fossil fuel use has amplified the greenhouse effect, these companies have emitted just a sliver of the world's total. The state can't credibly say company X's emissions cause damage Y, which is why it's not troubling itself with the necessary specifications. The scheme doesn't even hold the decision makers from the covered period accountable. It is today's company's shareholders who are on the hook. In the end, these companies' customers, meaning you and I, the everyday users of fossil fuel products, will bear the cost of the Superfund in the form of higher prices on heating bills and at the gas pump, and all the myriad goods to which oil and natural gas contribute. So this will be also an excuse that they can go after Trump and suggest it's Trump who hasn't seen gas prices go down when it's actually this Superfund that's going to cost you and I more at the gas tank in your house, heating your house. The Climate Change Superfund is a carbon tax shorn of economic logic. At least a carbon tax or a cap and trade system levied fair and square across an economy would give emitters an incentive to abate emissions. That's the state's time machine taxation targets. Only firms with a legal tie to New York set an obvious and different incentive: to flee, to leave the state. Fossil fuel companies, the alcoholic beverage industry, big tech, and anyone else in a line of business that might find itself afoul of the public mood now have reason to consider leaving the state. Because if they followed all the rules like they were supposed to, and yet 10 years later they could go after you because it is no longer fashionable, I think that they raise good points. Fossil fuel, the alcoholic beverage industry, big tech, etc. The retroactive nature of the law will sow deep concern about the state's commitment to the rule of law itself. The practices in which so-called responsible parties engaged were entirely above board, and they have not been found liable for any particular harm. In a very real sense, cost recovery demand is a euphemism for the exportation of justly earned profit. Though signed into law, what happens now with the Superfund remains uncertain. On paper, Governor Hochul is required to publish a report providing compliance guidelines for companies before the end of April, and companies are required to begin paying their bills next year. In practice, challenges in federal court are sure to draw out the process. At issue is whether states like New York, Vermont, and Hawaii can impose liability on interstate and international greenhouse gas emissions or are preempted by the U.S. Clean Air Act. Regardless of what the courts say, though, New York has made it clear to businesses that the state isn't worthy of their trust. Meant to mitigate flood damage, the Climate Change Superfund will prompt an exodus, and that is a threat that we have heard time and time again. That is why we talked about it so extensively with Assemblyman Phil Palmisano, what message this sends to the business community. Now, also, speaking of Hochul, we know that Representative Richie Torres is considering a primary challenge. So he's been coming out tough talking on public safety, even though he was an old defund the police person. He is now very tough on public safety because he saw the success that Lee Zeldin had on that message. Well, he has accused Governor Hochul of bungling oversight of New York's early intervention program for toddlers with developmental disabilities such as autism and Down syndrome. Quote, New York has the single worst early intervention program in the nation, ranking 50 out of 50. The time has come for you to end your dubious distinction of presiding over America's worst early intervention program. This is a letter that Richie Torres sent to Governor Hochul on Sunday. His criticism of the early childhood program is just the latest broadside against Hochul, who Torres is considered challenging in the 2026 Democrat primary for governor. There are 10,000 kids with disabilities on the waiting list for early intervention in the state, a 500% increase since 2020, Torres said. And early intervention providers, who include physical and speech therapists, among other specialists, are missing payments for their work, hamstringing the program that's already suffering from a backlog of patients. The early intervention program went off the rails last year when a state health department contractor, Massachusetts-based Public Consulting Group, launched a new software system for therapists to manage cases and bill for their services. The transition to the software system has been a glitch-prone and delay-stricken disaster. Half of New York's therapists who provide early intervention services are not getting their full paycheck, according to an industry survey. Albany-based therapist Lacey Swigart told the New York Post. Providers have to click 25 times to fill out a form for reimbursement, said Tracy Harris. I can't take on any new clients. They end up on a waiting list. The program is the worst it's ever been. Boy, I got to say, Richie Torres has been very outspoken, going against Hochul on nearly every issue, specifically this, which may be not on most people's radar. Torres urged Hochul to radically reduce the workforce shortages and waiting lists that have gotten worse under your watch, to stabilize working-class EI providers with an 11% reimbursement rate increase, and to stabilize cash-strapped counties with their fair share of the revenue. On another New York issue, we better take a break. We got a couple other New York issues. We're also going to talk a lot about the Trump administration, just some breaking stories coming out of New York this morning. But, of course, you can weigh in on the football game. A lot of people have done so far. Did you see J.D. Vance on CBS on the Sunday show? What were your thoughts there? I thought he did a very good job. But why even go to those outlets if it is going to be so negative? So, I mean, she was in attack mode, thinking that she knows better for this country than the person who was elected president of the United States and vice president of the United States. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on. A couple of last quick updates on New York. Stay with us. We will be right back, frankly speaking, here on WYDC TV, Big Fox.
Today's top story, increasing fuel costs continue to drive up inflation, making it harder to afford everything from food to home heating.
Here at Hustlesons, we know the only way to beat inflation is to fight inflation. So we're fighting back with zero interest financing and big cash rebates. Get a 4-person hot tub for your family for as little as $100 per month and pay zero interest. Or save up to $3,000 on a fabulous salt system hot tub. And of course, you will always get Hustlesons' unbelievable service. Don't let inflation fears kill your dreams. Fight back with Hustlesons. Remember, it's always fun to poke in the corners at Hustlesons.
With any of Life Alert's 3 emergency systems, help can be summoned immediately, and batteries never need charging.
This is Life Alert. I'm calling for help right now.
Life Alert saves a life from a catastrophe every 11 minutes.
For a free brochure, call 1-800-806-2212. 1-800-806-2212.
Are diapers destroying your confidence? Men's Liberty is the answer for incontinence. Quality of life is so important. You want quality of life up here. But guys, diapers, that's down here. Imagine staying dry 24 hours, day and night. Quality of life, up here. Men's Liberty can help with their revolutionary and super discreet urine collection system that's safe, sanitary, and has sold over 5 million. So discreet, no one knows you're wearing it, giving you a long-term solution to deal with incontinence. With Men's Liberty, life-changing freedom, and Medicare can cover it. Call Men's Liberty to get a free week supply with your first order and see how Men's Liberty may be available at little or no cost to you. Let Men's Liberty help you get back out there. Quality of life? Up here, with the most revolutionary solution to incontinence ever made. Call Men's Liberty right away.
Call 800-484-4675. That's 800-484-4675.
The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio. Let's go to some viewer comments. Governor Newsom also buckled to Trump as he is giving help to North Carolina and will only help California if Newsom makes it a law to have U.S. ID to vote and to turn on the water. Yes, that was interesting. Did you see, because Governor Newsom is fighting for his political life. He was, and perhaps maybe still is, a front runner in the Democrat Party for running for president, right? So he meets Trump at the tarmac and does that with his hands overacting, trying to make it look like he really was tough talking to Trump. It did not come off that way. I think he was hoping it would, that he would be, a hero of the left for getting in Trump's face. It came off quite the opposite. Looked weak, in my opinion. Your thoughts on that? Now, here is a controversial text from a viewer. New York has 3 pro football teams that couldn't beat most high school teams. You said it, not me. All right. New York coffers hit a new high from marijuana tax receipts. The Empire State is expected to generate $161.8 million in tax revenues from its legal weed business, not to be mistaken with the sticker stores that pay no taxes, that are essentially a bootleg operation. That's 4 times what it raked in last year. We know that that's been the Wild Wild West. They had a horrible, disastrous rollout of the legalization of marijuana. That's why you saw so many illegal stores infiltrate your communities. Governor Hochul's budget released last week also projected generating $248 million in revenue from the state licensed cannabis industry for the next fiscal year, running from April 1st to March 31st of 2026. That's up from $43.3 million raised in 22 to 23. State budget officials predict that the revenues will grow to $339 million in fiscal year 2027, $363 million in 2028, and $374 million in 2029. Okay. A wholesale excise tax of 9% is imposed on cannabis firms, while an excise tax of 13% is levied at the retail sales level, with 9% going to the state and 4% to participating localities such as New York City. An excise tax of 3.15% also is imposed on the gross receipts from medical cannabis firms that have been in existence for over a decade. 40% of the state's revenue from the legal cannabis taxes are allocated to education funding across the state, while another 40% goes to a community reinvestment program that will provide grants to neighborhoods most impacted by cannabis prohibition. Receipts of the first round of $5 million in the funding will soon be announced. So there you go. So kind of getting on track. $161.8 million in tax revenue coming from the legalization of marijuana. One last update on New York. You know, we talk at a time when so many people are leaving our state because of high taxes, regulations. The list can go on. Public safety being a major issue. People are concerned for their well-being and their family's well-being. But leave it to New York to focus on what's important. We may soon be allowed to use paid sick leave to look after your pets. Now, this, though, specifically out of New York City. New York City's council is set to consider legislation that would allow New Yorkers to take paid sick leave to care for their pets and service animals. Council member Sean Abreu, who sponsored the bill, said the change could promote health for both the pets and their humans. Quote, when you take care of your animals, you're taking care of yourself, too. The leave would be included in that already mandated by New York State, where companies must provide up to 40 or 56 hours of paid sick leave per year, depending on the size of the company. We're not giving any additional days. We're just saying let's give individuals the flexibility to use that time as they wish. Studies cited by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services have shown that interacting with animals decreases level of stress-related hormone cortisol and lowers blood pressure. Researchers also found that animals can reduce loneliness, increasing feelings of social support, and boost one's mood. An estimated 68% of U.S. households have a pet, according to the department. So you may soon be able to use your paid sick leave to look after your pet. It's good to see that we're focused in New York on what's important. So did you watch Vance clash with Margaret Brennan during the CBS Sunday program Face the Nation? We're going to talk about what he had to say, what that looked like. There's a couple other things here about Vance, and then we're going to talk about immigration, as the feds have been rounding up a lot of illegal immigrants. We talked about Colombia. If you want to continue to focus on that, I'd be more than happy to, but the agreement has been met, and the government of Colombia met all of Trump's demands, and they will soon be taking in, as Trump said, the illegal aliens from Colombia will now be returned from the United States to Colombia. So we can talk about that as well. Stay with us. We're just getting started, and the first hour is almost through. Isn't it hard to believe how fast this program goes? We can read more of your comments, but I do want to get your opinion on this. Again, the media clearly not having learned its lesson. What you see here is this real-time fact checks, which are very often incorrect. You see an anger from Margaret Brennan, what's the word I'm looking for? Condescending attitude that she knows better than the person elected to be president of the United States and vice president of the United States. She knows better. And doing that lecturing where it's, well, you do know that, right? Which is a very annoying, for lack of a better word, debate tactic from the left. Well, you do know, as if you're too ignorant to not see their way, to see what they're saying. So there was a bit of a clash. I thought J.D. Vance kept a cool head and did a very good job. We're going to talk about that when we come back. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back.
Attention, Elmeron may lead to vision loss.
If you have suffered vision problems after taking Elmeron to treat bladder pain, call the Hearn Law Firm. Elmeron may be responsible for your vision problems, and you may deserve compensation for your injuries.
If you took Elmeron and now have vision problems, call the Hearn Law Firm at 888-308-3866 right now. You could find out if you qualify in less than 2 minutes. Call 888-308-3866 for your free case review.
Are you 50? Would you like to get up to 33% more income in retirement? Then call now for this free book, Annuity Do's and Don'ts for Baby Boomers. This free book reveals little-known secrets about annuity strategies that will help you make the right choices before buying an annuity. Call right now for your free book, and as a bonus, we'll also throw in a free annuity rate report. Both absolutely free for calling Annuity General today.
Call 800-354-5972.
The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio. So in the last segment, we had a controversial statement made by a viewer who said that New York has 3 pro football teams that couldn't beat most high school teams. So in response, a different viewer wrote, was the controversial caller Margaret Brennan? It sounded like something that could easily be proven wrong by anyone who wanted to take the time to entertain the conversation. Oh, we're getting heated here this morning, Frankly Speaking. Thank you very much. Comment from a different viewer. If New York State Democrats weren't such a huge precursor of cortisol, people wouldn't need to take time off of work under any circumstances. Now we learn that they may allow you, well, this is more in the city, time off to care for your pets. Comment from a different viewer. Some of the marijuana tax revenue is supposed to go towards education. Yeah, as much of that will be used as the amount of lotto revenue that does. Just because they say it will doesn't ever mean it's done. You're exactly right. Lotto, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's, I think, one scratch-off ticket where the money actually goes to the education system. So, yeah, that's a good point. They say it's going to go to education. We will see. So, as that viewer mentioned about Margaret Brennan, Vice President J.D. Vance clashed with CBS host Margaret Brennan on Sunday morning's Face the Nation, when the Republican defended President Trump's decision to halt a refugee program that quickly barred hundreds of Afghans from reaching the U.S. last week. Vance tore into Brennan during a sit-down interview on Face the Nation, arguing the vetting process refugees currently undergo is not thorough enough, and that his, quote, primary concern as a vice president is to look after the American people. Brennan asked whether Afghan refugees, including some who worked with the U.S. government, should be allowed in the country, and pointed out Vance said last year he doesn't think the country, quote, should abandon anybody who's been properly vetted and helped us. But Vance was quick to insist he doesn't think all the refugees have been vetted the right way. And now that we know that we have vetting problems with a lot of these refugee programs, we absolutely cannot unleash thousands of unvetted people into our country, he said. Another further prodding by Brennan. Of course, you can't drop it, that real-time fact check, which is just so obnoxious and so very often wrong. So she kept pushing back. Vance shot back, citing an Afghan national who was arrested after allegedly planning a terrorist attack on Election Day last November. The suspect, Nasir Ahmad Tawahidi, was living in Oklahoma City on a special immigration visa that he was allowed in after the Biden administration's sloppy withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021. Quote, I don't want my children to share a neighborhood with people who are not properly vetted. And because I don't want it for my kids, I'm not going to force it on any other American citizens' kids to do that either. Brennan replied it wasn't clear if he was radicalized after he arrived in the U.S. or while he was still in the Middle East, arguing it was a very particular case. And that's that kind of real fact-checking. Well, you do know, right? It's so condescending. It's one of the reasons why CBS, CNN, so many are hemorrhaging and money, having to let go, specifically CNN, having to let go so many staff members. Well, this is what J.D. Vance said. I don't really care, Margaret. I don't want that person in my country. And I think most Americans agree with me. Now, Tawahidi didn't arrive in the U.S. through a refugee program, but through a humanitarian parole program that was allowed to stay temporarily while applying for residential status, officials said last year. Trump last week suspended America's refugee resettlement program an action that was initially expected to take effect on Monday. But travel plans were also subsequently canceled for refugees already greenlit to enter the country potentially before the order started. Among those whose plans were put on pause were more than 1,600 Afghans who helped the U.S. during its war in the Middle East. The refugee program has allowed hundreds of thousands of people fleeing war and persecution across the globe to reach the U.S. So telling Margaret Brenner, I don't really care, Margaret, that was one of numerous instances where they butted heads, and you could see the condescension in her questioning, knowing in her mind that she is much, much smarter than Trump and Vance, and that she had to use her opportunity to interview Vance to lecture him, to lecture the president. Now, J.D. Vance did weigh in on that Catholic bishop that we mentioned at the U.S. conference or at the National Prayer. We mentioned it last week. A lot of people were outraged. We were receiving the comments. Well, Vice President J.D. Vance fired back at the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops over its denunciation of the Trump administration's rule change allowing ICE raids in churches and schools. Last week, the religious group slammed the move for turning places of care, healing, and solace into places of fear and uncertainty for those in need, and warned that it endangers the trust between pastors and the people they serve. Now, this coming off the heels of the bishop that, I think she was Episcopalian though, right? That lectured using her pulpit to lecture the Trump administration, sounding very much like Margaret Brennan. Knowing so much more than the person who was elected, not only through the Electoral College, but through the popular vote, got the popular vote, and a landslide. They know better because they still consider him a buffoon, him and Vance, because how could anybody vote for them? Because no one that they know in their media bubble voted for him. But anyway, we go back to this. Last week, the religious group slammed the move, as I mentioned. As a practicing Catholic, I was actually heartbroken by that statement, Vance told Margaret Brennan. I think that the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops needs to actually look in the mirror a little bit and recognize that when they receive over $100 million to help resettle illegal immigrants, are they worried about humanitarian concerns, or are they actually worried about their bottom line? If they're worried about the humanitarian costs of immigration enforcement, let them talk about the children who have been sex trafficked because of the wide open borders of Joe Biden. That's when moderator, if you want to call her that, Margaret Brennan pressed Vance about whether the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops is actively hiding criminals from law enforcement, but the vice president was evasive. I think the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops has frankly not been a good partner in common sense immigration enforcement that the American people voted for. And I hope, again, as a devout Catholic, that they'll do better. Brennan also pressed Vance about the hardline immigration policy, how it would have a chilling effect that could make parents reluctant to send their children to school. I desperately hope it has a chilling effect, he said, on illegal immigrants coming into our country. Now, Vance has been baptized a Catholic back in 2019 after having been an evangelical Protestant. Tech billionaire Peter Thiel was reportedly influential in Vance's decision to convert. President Trump, who had grown up Presbyterian and now considers himself to be a non-denominational Christian, has previously clashed with leadership in the Catholic Church, including Pope Francis. Francis recently blasted Trump's mass deportation plan as a disgrace. Now it should be noted First Lady Melania Trump is a Catholic. And we have, after last week, Marianne Edgar Budd, I believe I'm pronouncing that name right. That was where she lectured, used the inaugural prayer service to lecture both Trump and Vance in front of their families, taking that quote-unquote opportunity to show her leftist politics. And that's all it is. The people that are praising her are people like on The View that had her on instantly, that look at her as a hero. That same goes for Margaret Brennan. It's the same type of activism where they can go in their far left circles and get a pat on the back for really sticking it to Trump and Vance. Except for in Margaret Brenner's, I guess to her, I don't know detriment, Vance wasn't taking it. And Vance did a great job of pushing back on her radicalized questions. Vance, in his CBS interview, also asserted that the administration has empowered law enforcement to enforce the law everywhere to protect Americans. This is a very unique country, and it was founded by some immigrants and some settlers. But just because we were founded by immigrants doesn't mean that 240 years later that we have to have the dumbest immigration policy in the world. The vice president also defended Trump's move to suspend the U.S. refugee admissions program with a few carve-outs while his administration studies the issue. He said, I don't agree that these immigrants or all these refugees have been properly vetted. In fact, we know that there are cases of people who allegedly were properly vetted and then were literally planning terrorist attacks in our country. We absolutely cannot unleash thousands of unvetted people into our country. I don't want my children to share a neighborhood with people who are not properly vetted. Now, Vance's wide-ranging interview with Face the Nation marks his first major televised sit-down interview since being sworn in as vice president. And we saw during the election season, he did a great job with these far-left reporters like Margaret Brennan and pushing back, and he is very good with the press. If you even noticed when Pete Hegseth got sworn in, he took questions at the end of that. Not necessary, but he did, and that's one clear difference. And I know I mentioned this last week with former Congressman Joe Semplinsky, but it's so clear that the media is focused on Trump, who is so open to the media. I mean, I would argue that Trump has probably spoken to the media more in his first week than Biden did in his whole term of 4 years. So he's so wide open, but that gives the media the opportunity to show their disdain for Trump and Vance, as we saw from Margaret Brenner on Sunday's Face the Nation. We got a couple other things here about Vance. We're going to talk about immigration. We got to take our last break of this hour. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox.
Lease a brand new 2024 Subaru Crosstrek Premium all-wheel drive featuring power moonroof and heated seats for only $359 a month for 36 months. Make Carbine simple. Drive your deal at Simmons Rockwell Subaru in Big Flats.
Is it most important? Don't you want more energy? Now's the best time to make every day better and relieve those achy muscles and pains than with the Hesselson's Hot Tub. Hesselson's has hot tubs in stock and available for immediate delivery with unbelievable savings. Hesselson's offers 0% interest-free financing for up to 5 full years. Hesselson's carries the only hot tub brand in the industry with the exclusive freshwater salt system that is eco-friendly and easy to use and only enhances your hot tubbing experience. Come in today and see why your next hot tub should be a Hesselson's hot tub. And remember, it's always fun to poke in the corners at Hesselson's.
In a game of viewer, Urkel, glasses, nerd. It pays to know your nerds. If you guys didn't get nerd with me sitting up here on this show, 25 words or less.
Weeknights at 5 and 5:30 on Big Fox.
Welcome to Frankly Speaking, talking to the people that affect your life, that affect all of our day-to-day lives. This is something you're not going to get anywhere else. We've got a lot to offer. There'll be a lot of news, local, regional, national, really the things that affect you. And I think you'll be glad that you tuned in. So think of it as radio on TV. Frankly Speaking, live, 2 hours long, starting at 6 a.m. on WYDC TV Big Fox. This is history. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back as we wrap up hour number 1 of Frankly Speaking. Let's go through a couple of quick comments from viewers. This is in response to the New York football teams that wouldn't be able to be a high school team, according to a viewer. The viewer saying, when is the last time a New York team won anything but second place or less? Typical that I would be criticized for pointing out the obvious. In New York, our government is running on the same premium. Just go along with losing. It's okay. Thank you very much, viewer. From a different viewer. I'm an Episcopalian, and I was horrified to listen to that woman speak at the national prayer. Things like that should not be allowed in church. Thank you. Well, thank you for reaching out. Yes, I thought it was a gross misuse of her forum. And you know that she was proud of herself because in her circle, you know, she gets invited on The View. She'll get a lot of pats on the back from the far left. And that's apparently what she wanted. And let's face it, that's what she got. So it shouldn't come as a surprise. But I don't know how she wasn't, speaking of the word vetted, how she wasn't properly vetted. You could almost see the writing on the wall when she got up there that it was going to be a lecture. But, you know, look at it with Margaret Brennan. I tie those two together because they both have that lecturing. They know better than the American voter. They know better than Trump and Vance. And they are not afraid to show their contempt for this administration, their anger at this administration, even though Vance and Trump obviously have been so open to the media, doing so much press. You would think they would be perhaps more fair, but they went after 4 years of not really talking or having the opportunity to talk to the president, hiding his mental decline. And now we have a magnifying glass on every move that this administration makes. We're going to talk more about this administration and some of the things that they're doing. When we come back, our number one in the books. Stay with us. Away. We will be right back.
Have you been unable to work for over a year due to a mental or physical disability?
Were you recently denied Social Security disability benefits? Great news. You may be eligible for money, back pay, relief.
If you've been pre-qualified and diagnosed with a recognized condition that prohibits you from working, our lawyers can file a claim to get your disability benefit.
Call us today and find out more.
Call now, 844-617-0440.
Get out!
Andy!
Get out of my room! Get out!
Andy! You're not lying. I didn't say anything. Yes, you did. What did you say?
Our number two, well, frankly speaking, as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm your host, Frank Akam. Keep those comments coming in. We got a lot of great comments. Here we go. That bishop only serves to augment your argument that you need to know who you are voting for. That's a very good point. Now, this obviously not what you would think of as typical voting, but you're right. Know who your pastor is, who your bishop is. That really doesn't come as a surprise when you saw her that she was going to get political, just like with Margaret Brennan. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate for the Trump family that had to sit through that, and that this lady thought that that was the appropriate time to do that. But it wasn't about the appropriate time. It was about getting that attention. So she'll get the interviews like on The View, where she can lecture others about their political stance. So I appreciate you saying that. Thank you for that comment. Comment from a different viewer. It's about time we have a president and vice president that are open and talkative to the people, instead of the last government who hid and made you guess. Yes. Or if you said, boy, it seems like he's not mentally fit, from some of the videos I saw, they would say that you were pushing propaganda, that you're wrong. The media. Yeah, wouldn't you have liked to see a Margaret Brennan interview where she was that forceful with anybody in the Biden administration? Of course, that's not the case. No one asked the tough questions of Biden. They wanted to protect him because he's got the D next to his name. But kind of tying in with this, Politico has a piece that was written on Saturday about the stark contrast between the invisible and shielded former President Biden and the omnipresent President Donald Trump. Since Trump's inauguration last week, White House correspondent Ellie Stokols and White House Bureau Chief Dasha Burns reported how Trump has given multiple speeches, made several policy announcements, and has spoken to reporters at length. Trump's huge media presence is a change compared to the more muted Biden years. That's a proper way of putting it. Muted, huh? Think about that, though, and that's one thing the media used to get frustrated with Trump, is that he actually made news even on the weekend. Think of how busy this weekend was with the Columbia situation. But I'll continue. Yes, Trump was eager to sign all those executive orders reversing Biden's policies. But the bigger flex for Trump was to contrast his accessibility, aptitude, and activity with his predecessor, who was so often shielded from public view by aides, weary of showcasing the 82-year-old growing limitation. As fast as the movers changed out the White House furniture, the country went from an invisible president, unable to command the spotlight, to an omnipresent one who wants the public's attention at all time. One reporter referred to Trump's pressers as a free-for-all for journalists after 4 years of begging for access to the more cloistered Biden. Oh, you weren't begging for access. You were happy to cover. Why didn't you report on that then at the time, that you were getting no coverage, that Biden wasn't talking to the media? I mean, for heaven's sakes, Trump, on Inauguration Day, gave a 45-minute presser. Quote, although Biden did take questions from reporters here and there, his more informal exchanges with the press were sporadic and rarely lasted more than a few minutes. More often than not, he was out of view. One downside the article considered, however, was whether constant access to Trump and his thoughts would almost be, quote, too much for the media and the public to absorb. Quote, within the press corps, there is some ambivalence about Trump's fire hose on blast. The excitement about being able to ask the president about why he pardoned people convicted of vandalism, trespassing, and violently attacking police officers, not to mention questions about everything from tariffs to TikTok, is tempered by the awareness that it is all, once again, too much. Too much to process and capture in real time. Too much for the country to digest. On Sunday, Trump held a 20-minute press gaggle with reporters on Air Force One, where he discussed a variety of topics like TikTok and Greenland. He also took a dig at his predecessor by telling reporters that they have a little bit more access than they did with Biden by like 5,000%. So yes, to your point, it is nice to hear from the president and vice president. I think J.D. Vance did a great job of pushing back on CBS. Also, if you are not aware, J.D. Vance is fulfilling his promise to the American voters as he makes his first trip as vice president to Damascus, Virginia, to visit areas affected by Hurricane Helene in late September. It will be Vance's second trip to Damascus since the hurricane swept across the southeast on September 27th, destroying parts of Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida, and leaving more than 200 people dead. Quote, Vice President Vance visited with Damascus residents in October after the town was ravaged by Hurricane Helene. He pledged to be back, and now he's fulfilling his promise. The first week of his administration has made it clear that President Trump and Vice President Vance keep their word. Trump spoke at 3 town halls, but allowed a group of locals who lost everything in Helene to share their own personal stories during his stop. Some locals have taken issue with FEMA and the handling of the disaster, saying it has too much red tape for those in need of immediate assistance to get the help they needed. Did you also see Trump's sit-down meeting with Newsom and Bass, not letting Bass get away with some of the things she was trying to get away with? He said, we've got to start working now. If they want to start rebuilding today, they should be allowed to do so. Wasn't really necessarily ready for that. Also, I don't think Newsom was ready for the pushback that he received from President Trump. You know, he went on the tarmac and tried to flail his hands around and point at the president because he thought that would get him a lot of attention from the far left because he wants to save his political career. He wants to run for president because he's term limited, I believe, after this year, as running for governor again of California. So he wanted that optic of going after the president. And I think it backfired. I think it made him look much weaker and more almost, I don't want to say temper tantrum, but almost unhinged. Well, Trump said, we're going to fix it, and we're going to fix it as fast as you can. It's a massive amount of damage. FEMA has really let us down, let the country down. And I don't know if that's Biden's fault or whose fault it is, but we're going to take over. We're going to do a good job. All right, we're going to talk about immigration. Oh, look at all these comments coming in. What did you think of the interview with Margaret Brennan and J.D. Vance? I don't even know if you could call it an interview. It was almost more of a debate. She was so aggressive in her anger and her disdain for not just Vance, but for President Trump as well, and for the American voter. She was clearly more intelligent than the American voter who put Trump in that landslide victory. And she wants the world to know it. So she would say things like, well, of course you know, and she would scoff and almost roll her eyes. It was very unprofessional, but exactly what we've come to expect from the mainstream media, and it's why the mainstream media is hemorrhaging jobs, is losing money because of clear bias like that and what we saw from Margaret Brennan. So we can talk more about that if you'd like. I see a lot of comments coming in. Stay with us. Oh, another wave. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. Oh, no, I have a minute. No, what am I talking about? I got a little whack there. We got a little bit of time. Here's a question from a viewer. Is FEMA still not serving Republicans? Well, I don't know the answer to that. They seem to be doing better, perhaps, but North Carolina, we know that there was that bias where they were told not to go to houses where there were Trump flags. And they even said that's standard practice. That's nothing new. Some whistleblower saying, yeah, there's been this bias from the beginning. So FEMA, which is paid for by you and I, the taxpayer, not helping anybody with a different political opinion than theirs. If you were showing your support for Trump, they said that there could be that you could be too confrontational. So you don't need to be helped. Now let's talk about immigration. The feds rounded up 50 members of the Tren de Aragua gang at a makeshift nightclub in Denver as nationwide ICE raids bust child rapists and suspected ISIS terrorists. Federal agents rounded dozens of members of the gang in an overnight raid on a makeshift nightclub in Denver after the vicious Venezuelan prison gang terrorized the city and the suburb of Aurora. We know about that. We've talked about that. And if you recall, it was Vance and Trump. I can't remember who the reporter was, but Vance saying, this is going to stop. Can you imagine? Was it during the debate where he said, do you hear yourself that it's only one apartment complex that is being run by these gangs in America? No, it was, I can't think of her name, but it was a Sunday show. The DEA said agents in Colorado interrupted an invite-only party where dozens of the gangbangers were cutting loose in Adams County. The bust netted cash, weapons, guns, and drugs, including pink cocaine, a powerful narcotic that the gang has played a major role in distributing across the U.S. Video released by the DEA's Rocky Mountain Division showed a white bus full of busted gang members being escorted on the snowy roads by law enforcement vehicles. The arrest ensnared around 50 members of the gang in all, marking the latest in the Trump administration's crackdown on illegal immigrants with criminal backgrounds who pose a potential threat to public safety. Quote, we want the country to know that we will all support the president's priority to round up the most dangerous illegal criminals, said DEA Acting Administrator Derek Maltz. Both President Trump and Homan have pledged to find, arrest, and ultimately deport millions of migrants who have sneaked into the country illegally. Quote, the president and the DOJ leaders have made it clear that we are going to work together with a sense of urgency to hold violent criminals accountable. The citizens of this country must feel safe every day throughout the country. One of my goals is to help build an army of good to fight evil. The first migrant roundups, part of an operation dubbed Return to Sender, are focusing on migrants who have been charged with crimes or who have been ordered deported by judges. The Drug Enforcement Administration and Immigration and Customs Enforcement led Sunday's pre-dawn efforts in Colorado, and they were joined by squads from Homeland Security investigations and ICE's enforcement and removal operations to execute the bust. The Post has been at the forefront of reporting on this. This is the New York Post, talking about the gang terrorizing the Denver suburb of Aurora. The bust happened just a few miles northwest of Aurora. Similar enforcement operations have taken place across the country in the recent days, rounding up more than 600 illegal immigrants in sanctuary cities from coast to coast, including New York State. ICE New York agents took several migrant criminals into custody, including one that was known or suspected terrorists, on Saturday in West New York, across the Hudson River from Manhattan. Officers stormed an apartment building near 61st Street and Harrison Place around 7:30 a.m. Surveillance footage showing them peeking at mailboxes and then heading upstairs. It was not immediately clear if any arrests were made, but ICE told the outlet it doesn't comment on ongoing enforcement. So there you are. Feds round up 50 Tren de Aragua members and makeshift nightclub in Denver. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, some other examples of our immigration policy and how it's changed. We also have quite a few other issues to get to this morning, so I hope that you will stay with us. Keep those comments, keep those waves coming in. And now we've got to take that break. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking, only on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us.
If you or a loved one regularly used hair relaxers or straighteners and were diagnosed with uterine, ovarian, or endometrial cancer, you may be entitled to significant financial compensation.
I've used hair relaxers for years. I had no idea they could cause cancer.
Chemical hair relaxers and straighteners have been linked to serious conditions, including several types of cancer. If you used hair relaxers and have been diagnosed with uterine, ovarian, or endometrial cancer, call us now. There's no fee unless we win your case. Call today.
When you think Hesselsen's. Hesselsen's has the largest selection of work boots in the area. Composite and steel-toe boots, Met-Guard boots, soft-toe boots, and hikers, duty and western boots, all in one location. Hesselsen's at Meyer Heights. Hesselsen's has men's and ladies' boots in all sizes and widths. Choose from the largest names in the industry: Danner, Carolina, Timberland Pro, Keen Utility, Thorogood, Area, and Georgia, to name just a few. Hesselsen's has been locally owned and operated since 1955, so when you think local service and great selection, think Hesselsen's. Remember, it's always fun to poke in the corners at Hesselsen's.
Trust your child to Dr.
Henches at either Watkins Glen, Elmira, Horseheads, or Elkland Family Dentistry. All 4 locations provide cutting-edge technology to make sure your visit is comfortable and stress-free. Dr. Henches offers treatment in all areas of dentistry, including same-day crowns, implants, root canals, oral surgery, and treatment for all ages. For the best dental care in the region, trust Dr. Henches and his staff at Watkins Glen, Horseheads, Elmira, and Elkland Family Dentistry. Call any one of his offices today or visit them online for more information.
I'm Mary Crawford. I've lived here for 70 years, but I do fine right here in my house, and I want to be here as long as I can be. And I feel comfortable knowing that if something happened to me, someone would know because of the cameras that are installed in various spots in my home. That has been a wonderful gift to me to be able to have that security and that support from Full Circle America, and that's
The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. If you are just getting up, the government of Colombia has agreed to all of President Trump's terms, including the unrestricted acceptance of all illegal aliens from Colombia returned from the United States, including on U.S. military aircraft without limitation or delay. This is a statement from the White House. Based on this agreement, the fully drafted IEEPA tariffs and sanctions will be held in reserve and not signed unless Colombia fails to honor this agreement. The visa sanctions issued by the State Department and enhanced inspections from Customs and Border Protection will remain in effect until the first plane load of Colombian deportees is successfully returned. Today's events make clear to the world that America is respected again. President Trump will continue to fiercely protect our nation's sovereignty, and he expects all other nations of the world to fully cooperate in accepting the deportation of their citizens illegally present in the United States. Okay, let's go to some viewer comments. Is Hochul cooperating with the deportation of criminals? Not that I know of. I think she actually said she was going to fight that. So no, I don't believe she is cooperating. Next up, a comment from a different viewer. This is to the media. If you think you can beat down Trump, you got another thing coming. He will beat you down. Yes, and same with Vance. I mean, I think Vance is really well prepared when it comes to the press. I was really impressed when I went to see him speak in Williamsport. And I was in the press section myself. When he took questions, they weren't scripted. The questions from the press ranged from everything about small town Williamsport issues all the way up to, of course, January 6th. He was asked about that by one reporter, and that reporter was then booed. But he handled all these questions, and it was quite impressive. But back to immigration. ICE arrests nearly 1,000 illegal aliens during the 6 days of the Trump administration. The agency said law enforcement officers arrested 956 people and logged 554 detainers, which means there's probable cause to believe that that person is removable from the U.S. under federal immigration law. The ICE field office in Miami shared the details behind 5 of the illegal aliens arrested, 3 in Florida and 2 in Puerto Rico. The 2 arrested in Puerto Rico were residents of the Dominican Republic, and one was charged with domestic violence, while the others were charged with driving under the influence. A Nicaraguan national was arrested at the Broward County Jail for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, unlawful carrying of a concealed weapon, discharging a firearm in public, and driving with a suspended license. The list goes on and on. We don't have to go through each individual case. But since President Trump took office last Monday, mass deportation operations have taken place every day, with as many as over 400 arrests made on the first day. Quote, removing criminal aliens from our communities isn't just enforcement, it's protection. Ensuring the safety and security of our neighborhoods starts with upholding the law. Now, Trump, and I mentioned this earlier, Trump says he may send nearly 90,000 newly hired IRS agents to the border after issuing indefinite hiring freeze. President Trump said Saturday that he is considering sending nearly 90,000 newly hired IRS agents to guard the southern border, just days after he issued an indefinite hiring freeze on the federal agency. The 47th Commander-in-Chief told a boisterous crowd of supporters, yes, he even held a rally already. Did you happen to watch the rally? I forgot to mention that he would also fire the IRS employees, many of whom had salaries funded by $72 billion provided for the federal agency under the Inflation Reduction Act. Quote, they hired or tried to hire 88,000 workers to go after you. And we're in the process of developing a plan to either eliminate all of them or maybe we'll move them to the border. This was during a rally at Circle Resort and Casino in Las Vegas. Quote, I think we're going to move them to the border where they are allowed to carry guns. You know, they're so strong on guns. But these people are allowed to carry guns, so we will probably move them to the border. Yes, we learned that some of these IRS agents were allowed to carry guns, so he is suggesting maybe we'll just let them go to the border. Trump kicked off the first day of his second term with a flurry of executive actions, as you know, including a measure that implements a federal hiring freeze with exceptions for posts related to national security and public safety and the military. The 90-day freeze will impact all federal agencies, with exception to the IRS, which will halt all hiring until Trump's administration, including the newly established Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, determines when it's of national interest to employ additional agents and staffers. The Republican also declared a national emergency at the U.S.-Mexico border, plans to create an external revenue office that will collect all foreign source revenue, such as tariffs. Trump has long threatened to raise tariffs on foreign countries, as you know. So there you are, maybe using those newly hired IRS employees, IRS agents, and sending them to the border. Now, Trump border czar, fan favorite Tom Homan, was on ABC's This Week yesterday. And he had to, of course, because all of the reporters are activists now, he had to push back. He said, we got military on the border, not only helping us with departure flights on military planes, or they're helping to build infrastructure. They're putting up concertina wire where they're down there to create a secure border and knock that border down. The DOD has helped administrators before, but not at this level. So it's a force multiplier, and it's sending a strong signal to the world, our border is closed. So Martha Raddatz said, so is this what we will see every single day, ending in what the president has promised is millions and millions being deported? He said, yes, but we're going to see the numbers steadily increase. The number of arrests nationwide as we open up the aperture. Right now, it's concentrating on public safety threats, national security threats. That's a smaller population. So we're going to do this on a priority basis. That's President Trump's promise, but as that opens, there'll be more arrests nationwide. So that's when Raddatz, of course, can't just let it go. When you talked about the aperture opening, they estimated perhaps that they would have been convicted or arrested in the past 700,000 to over 1 million. So after you do that, then you go after everybody else who was here illegally. He said, if you're in this country illegally, you're on the table. Because it's not okay to, violate the laws of this country. You got to remember, every time you enter the country illegally, you violated a crime under Title 8, the United States Code 1325. It's a crime. So if you're in a country illegally, you got a problem. And that's why I'm hoping those who are in the country illegally, who have not been ordered removed by the federal judge, should leave. So Martha Raddatz asks, while you are emphasizing that you go after national security threats, you have said no one's off the table. If you're in the country illegally, you better be looking over your shoulder. You should be afraid and start packing now. Is that what you're going to do to get hotel workers out or people in working on farms that they'll be so scared they just leave? Homan said, look, I think if you're in this country illegally, it's not okay. It's not okay to violate the laws of this country. We have millions of people standing in line, taking the test, doing their background investigations, paying the fees that want to come the right way. Now, Adam Schiff, he was on Meet the Press, and Kristen Welker said, let's talk about President Trump's agenda, particularly on immigration and the border. Now, he said, look, this is Adam Schiff, remember, who lied so frequently about information he had on Trump that he did not end up having. We see that he is very much hates, in many ways, the president. He said, look, the administration already has the authority to detain people that have committed violent crimes for deportation, and they should. But this bill is so broad that if you are a dreamer and you take a tube of toothpaste from the store, you can be detained for deportation. That, to me, is a terrible overreach. So the president already has the authority. I don't mind confirming he has the authority, but I don't want to broaden that to be able to deport dreamers for taking a tube of toothpaste. Where does that specific issue go? We've got some other things we're going to talk about. I see a lot of comments coming in. Stay with us. We will be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Stay with us.
I'm calling in regards about my mother, and I'm here, and I just want to thank you because it saved my mother's life yesterday. And I'd like to know the names of the people that came in and saved her so I could call and thank them. And she's doing fine. It's a wonderful thing. Thank you.
When you fall and cannot get up, an accident can turn into a tragedy. But with Life Alert, one touch of a button can get you help fast. Life Alert saves a person from a catastrophe every 10 minutes.
Life Alert is a lifesaver. If it weren't for Life Alert, I wouldn't be sitting here today.
For a free Life Alert brochure, call 1-800-806-2212. Call now, 1-800-806-2212. For a free brochure, call 1-800-806-2212.
Fox website is here now. WYDCTV.com. Local and national news that keeps you informed and involved. WYDCTV.com. Today's weather up to date and in your town. WYDCTV.com. Sports news, local events, and health stories that affect you. WYDCTV.com. The Big Fox website. Your news here now. WYDCTV.com.
The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio. Thank you to everybody reaching out. Got a lot of great comments. Let's get right to them. Who hired the 90,000? That was under the Biden administration. That's the 90 in relationship to the 90,000 IRS, nearly 90,000 IRS agents that were hired that Trump is threatening to send to the border. Well, this other viewer says, don't just send the IRS to the border, send them over it. Thank you very much. Comment from a different viewer. We've all heard the jokes about dying and standing before Peter at Heaven's Gate, explaining why he should let them enter. I'd love to be there when Bishop Bud tells him that she was on The View. Thank you very much. Comment from a different viewer. Good morning, Frank. Well, good morning. Biden consistently put a lid on the day at 10 a.m. without any appearances, while Trump starts about then and goes till 10 p.m. It is nonstop. I know I'm not even saying this jokingly. I forgot that weekends were full of news with the Trump administration. I should have remembered, but that's historically, yeah, you get some news from the Sunday talk shows, but it's not really a huge news day. But it is under the Trump administration. I remember last time reporters were complaining that there was just too much work. They were just doing too much coverage of Trump. Continuing with what that viewer had to say, media that knew of Biden's decline but never reported on it now have no credibility. I'm still searching truth, I don't know what to get her, for the JD interview because I certainly didn't see it live. I didn't see it live either. I don't remember where I ended up finding it on, maybe YouTube or something. But I really look forward to JD Vance's interviews because he does such a good job with what is a combative media, a hostile media. And he handles it wonderfully, just like he did it with Margaret Brennan, just like he did yesterday on Face the Nation. And he did a wonderful job pushing back and not allowing her to get her talking points in. And you can just see the anger and disdain and hate in the way that she asked the questions. Good luck. If you watched it, I'd love to know what you think. And if you watched it, other people, let me know. Did you see that Denmark is in, quote, crisis mode after Trump continues to push for Greenland? The Danish government reportedly descended into crisis mode following a call between President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen, during which the U.S. leader is said to have forcefully reiterated America's desire to acquire Greenland. A report from the Financial Times, citing several unnamed European officials with knowledge of the call, said President Trump spoke with the Prime Minister for about 45 minutes last week. Where did he get the time for all of this? The official said that Europe had assumed that Mr. Trump's demand that Denmark offer to sell Greenland to the U.S. were merely an opening negotiating tactic to push for more European NATO spending. However, following the call between Trump and the Prime Minister, it became clear that the new administration is set on acquiring the self-governing island. The intent was very clear. They want it. The Danes are now in crisis mode, one official said of the call, while another said the Danes are utterly freaked out by this. It's a very tough conversation. He threatened specific measures against Denmark, such as targeted tariffs. So they are in full crisis mode. I mean, Trump really wants Greenland. What's your thoughts on that? Your thoughts on acquiring Greenland? I know there's a lot of security reasons why it's a very good deal. Not something I expected Trump to take on so early on, but it's kind of like in his inaugural address when he even talked about the renaming of the Gulf of Mexico. I didn't expect that to, I expected to make good on his promises, don't get me wrong. I didn't expect it to come out that quickly, and that was a relatively new talking point that he had been using. So they're calling it a raucous first week in office. Donald Trump's going to keep his foot on the gas. The president starts off the week by attending a House GOP conference meeting at Trump National Doral, Miami, at a time to be determined. The GOP January meeting is an opportunity for Republicans to game plan their approach to implementing their shared agenda with President Trump. Major policy initiatives that are likely to be addressed are the president's sweeping border security and ongoing deportation initiatives, increasing domestic energy production, and advancing a new tax plan. House Speaker Mike Johnson told Politico that he expects to have a blueprint for a massive reconciliation package in place after the retreat. The House Budget Committee, which is tasked with writing the instructions on the bill, is set to meet next week. Johnson sent a letter to the president to address a joint session of Congress on March 4th, 2025. In the letter, Johnson wrote, "Your administration and the 119th Congress, working together, have the chance to make these next 4 years some of the most consequential in our nation's history. To that end, it is my distinct honor and great privilege to invite you to address a joint session of Congress on Tuesday, March 4th, 2025, in the chamber of the U.S. House of Representatives to share your America First vision for our legislative future. I eagerly await your response." Another event that is key and an early Trump priority will be a hearing at the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation titled Fees and Foreign Influence, examining the Panama Canal and its impact on U.S. trade and national security. That committee is headed by none other than Senator Ted Cruz. Newly confirmed Secretary of State Marco Rubio is scheduled to visit Panama this week. According to the State Department, the trip will include visits to the Dominican Republic, Costa Rica, Guatemala, and El Salvador. Confirmation hearings continue in the Senate this week with Tulsi Gabbard, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Kelly Loeffler, and Kash Patel all appearing. Now, undoubtedly, you know by now that Pete Hegseth was confirmed over the weekend, which was pretty, well, a lot of people wondered. Same with Kristi Noem. She is to lead the Department of Homeland Security. Were you surprised? I didn't know if Pete Hegseth would end up getting it. It was a tie with J.D. Vance coming in to vote, saying joking that I thought he wouldn't be having to vote in the Senate anytime soon. So I thought that was pretty interesting as well. But we got to take a short break. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Oh, wait, nope, wrong one. Hold on. There we go, Big Fox.
If you or a loved one regularly used hair relaxers or straighteners and were diagnosed with uterine, ovarian, or endometrial cancer, you may be entitled to significant financial compensation.
I've used hair relaxers for years. I had no idea they could cause cancer.
Chemical hair relaxers and straighteners have been linked to serious conditions, including several types of cancer. If you used hair relaxers and have been diagnosed with uterine, ovarian, or endometrial cancer, call us now. There's no fee unless we win your case. Call today.
The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security and Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Thank you so much for sharing and commenting and waving. We are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. Ken, I just saw that you sent in. I will get to that in the next segment. I haven't had a chance to read it all yet, but I'm not overlooking your comments. Thank you, Ken. Comment from some viewers. The Democrats are claiming if we send the illegals back, we won't have field workers. Well, bring back workfare, where people have to work to get their welfare check. Thank you very much. Comment from a different viewer. Greenland, in addition to national security, is also rich in natural resources, including natural gas. I saw a little bit about that. I mean, there's obviously a lot of positives for it. I'm not mocking or ridiculing it. I just didn't expect, again, I expect Trump to fulfill his promises. I didn't expect that to be such a major focus so early on with so many other things going on. All right. How about this? Boy, this is going to make a lot of people angry. The idea of carving President Donald Trump's likeness into South Dakota's Mount Rushmore is apparently picking up steam. According to the New York Post, Representative Anna Paulina Luna, Republican from Florida, said that she is introducing legislation to have the job done. Former Trump campaign manager Corey Lewandowski was the first to propose the move during a recent interview that he gave. In response, Luna said she would soon file legislation on the matter. Social media users were quick to respond to Luna's message. One person writing that Democrats would whine for years and years. Do it. Liberals will be so done. What a time to be alive. The National Park Service webpage regarding the monument said majestic figures of George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt, and Abraham Lincoln, surrounded by the beauty of the Black Hills of South Dakota, tell the story of the birth, growth, development, and preservation of this country. I have a feeling that will not happen, but I like that the chat and the conversation is beginning. The president added that he had never suggested, although based on all of the many things accomplished during the first 3.5 years, perhaps more than any other presidency, sounds like a good idea to me. If you recall back in August, Nancy Pelosi suggested that Joe Biden should be on Mount Rushmore because of the impact that he had. Now, as I mentioned, the Senate did confirm Noem to lead the Department of Homeland Security. The 59-34 vote to confirm former South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem capped off a relatively smooth process, even as other nominees face more intense scrutiny. I believe it's Wednesday and Thursday that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is going to start his confirmation hearing. That should be something interesting to watch. 7 Democrats voted with Republicans to confirm Noem. Senator John Fetterman, who ultimately voted against Hegseth, which was interesting. Tim Kaine, Andy Kim, Gary Peters, Jeanne Shaheen, Maggie Hassan, and Elise Slocum all voted for Noem. Noem will lead one of the most sprawling agencies in the federal government and one of particular importance in a Trump administration determined to crack down on a pathway for those fleeing danger and persecution. That's a little bit of bias there from the Hill. He also sought to end birthright citizenship, as we know. So Kristi Noem getting in, not as difficult for her as it was for Pete Hegseth. Pete Hegseth, of course, had that tie. He is sworn in now, but had that tie where J.D. Vance had to come and be the tiebreaker. Pete Hegseth said there is no more DEI at the Department of Defense. The president's guidance, lawful orders, is clear. No more DEI at Department of Defense, he wrote. In a handwritten note shared along with a post on X, Hegseth wrote, the Pentagon will comply immediately, no exceptions, name changes, or delays. He added that those who do not comply will no longer work here. Senator John Kennedy, I get such a kick out of watching John Kennedy at those hearings. He does such a good job. Highly recommend it if you get a chance. He also wrote, the best way to stop discriminating against people on the basis of race or gender is to stop discriminating against people on the basis of race or gender. Let DEI die. Now, Hegseth was sworn in Saturday morning after he secured his confirmation to lead the Pentagon on Friday. All praise and glory to God, he said. His will be done, and we're grateful to be here. Hegseth is a former Minnesota National Guard officer who served in Iraq and Afghanistan and a former Fox News host. Trump's newly created Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, headed up by Elon Musk, reported that approximately $420 million is currently or in pending contracts, mainly focused on DEI initiatives, had not been canceled. Also, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, issued a warning that President Trump has been clear that the United States will, quote, no longer be lied to nor taken advantage of it. It's good to hear this from our Secretary of State. And it's also true with what happened with Colombia breaking overnight. Of course, they agreed to all of Trump's terms. In a post, Rubio added that it was each country's responsibility to take back their citizens who have been in the U.S. illegally. He was referring to Colombia. After Trump intervened and threatened to impose several measures, such as 25% tariffs on all goods coming into the nation, a travel ban, and immediate visa revocation on Colombian government officials, among others, Petro backed down and said he would send a presidential plane to pick up the deported migrants. Rubio wrote, President Trump has made it clear that under his administration, America will no longer be lied to nor taken advantage of. It is the responsibility of each nation to take back their citizens who are illegally present in the United States in a serious and expedited manner. Colombian President Petro had authorized flights and provided all needed authorizations, and then canceled his authorizations when the planes were in the air. As demonstrated by today's actions, we are unwavering in our commitment to end illegal immigration and bolster America's border security. Boy, it's good to what a difference in this term as compared to the last 4 years. Now, there are some GOP senators, and you can expect this, they could start getting voted down, some of these nominees, even as the White House has reportedly threatened consequences. This coming from Mediaite. Republicans are reportedly starting to run out of patience with President Trump's national security nominees, as several controversial choices are soon to face confirmation votes in the Senate. According to NBC News, an unnamed Republican senator who has voted for all of Trump's nominees thus far warned that he and his colleagues could vote down national security picks who sound more like Tucker Carlson than a Republican. We'll only give so much, the senator said, because this is the future of the country. It's not entertainment television. Newly confirmed Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth made it through only with the help of J.D. Vance. Trump's picks for FBI Director Kash Patel and Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard are among those who are thought to be in for a tough fight this week. But the White House is warning of consequences for any Republican senator who does not get on board with Trump's nominees. It's pass-fail. You either support everyone or you don't, an unnamed senior White House official told NBC. The Senate needs to advise and consent, not advise and adjust. This is a very well-funded consortium of outside groups and political actors that are sophisticated, smart, and tough. We've already seen that they're providing air support and narrative support to some nominees. They'll still be very well-funded when the nominees are over, and they'll exact consequences, I'm sure, to those who did not support the president's nominees and get them to the finish line. There is, however, a question of just what kind of consequences can be imposed on several notable Republicans, including those who voted against Hegseth. Senator Mitch McConnell is thought to be unlikely to seek re-election, while Senator Susan Collins represents a state which Trump lost by 7 points in the 2024 election, and Senator Lisa Murkowski has already defeated a MAGA challenger in 2022. Think of those two going against Pete Hegseth, which is fine, whatever you think about that, but all based on the former sister-in-law, who is also split from Pete Hegseth's brother, coming out and releasing that statement, and her sister, the one that was actually married to Hegseth, denied all of it, but that was just the excuse that Murkowski and Collins needed to go against Trump's pick. Oh, by the way, since we're talking about, man, we got a lot of comments coming in. Did you see the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, has thrown its weight behind the lab leak theory as the most plausible origin of COVID-19 in what they call a low confidence assessment? Without providing details about why the spy agency was changing its position, the CIA informed reporters of its new position Saturday, just 2 days after John Ratcliffe was sworn in as the new director. Quote, "We have low confidence in this judgment and will continue to evaluate any available credible new intelligence reporting or open source information that could change the CIA's assessment." The CIA's shift in the assessment does not appear to be based on any significant new evidence. On his way out, former CIA Director William Burns had called on the agency to take a stance on COVID-19's origin instead of staying neutral. According to the Wall Street Journal, under Ratcliffe's watch, the CIA decided to declassify the assessment. Ratcliffe, who served as the Director of National Intelligence under the first Trump administration, has long favored the lab leak theory. Now Langley joins the FBI and Energy Department, which runs a slew of labs and research facilities across the U.S., in its assessment and agreeing that a lab leak is the most likely origin. 4 other agencies still back the zoonotic theory that the highly contagious virus naturally mutated from bats to infect humans, likely via intermediaries like pangolins. I don't remember how you say that. The National Intelligence Council, a group of top intelligence officials that reports to the DNI, also backed that theory. So there you go. There's just a couple quick updates. We got to take a short break. A lot of comments coming in. I will try to get to as many as we possibly can, so keep them coming in. Boy, we're almost done for the show today. We've only got about 15 minutes left, and we still got a lot to cover. So stay with us. This is, Frankly Speaking, here on WYDC TV, Big Fox.
It's a new season of Sherry.
Having a good time has always been my number one goal. I tend to get crazy. At my age, I should not be jumping up and down like that. And if you don't know what I mean, ask your mama. The young ones, y'all like, we don't know what you're talking about. But I promise you, in 30 years, you will.
It's the best time in daytime.
Weekdays at 2 p.m. on Big Fox.
Sheldon and Missy face off in
Why can't we watch DuckTales? Because we don't learn anything.
Book Smarts versus Street Smarts.
Is it working? Are you feeling motivated? Very.
It's the battle of twins.
Life is so confusing. I always hoped it would be easier for me when I grew up. It's gonna be all right. You were faking. Bazinga.
Young Sheldon.
Weeknights at 6:30 on Big Fox.
Welcome to Frankly Speaking, talking to the people that affect your life, that affect all of our day-to-day lives. This is something you're not going to get anywhere else. We've got a lot to offer. There'll be a lot of news, local, regional, national, really the things that affect you. And I think you'll be glad that you tuned in. So think of it as radio on TV. Frankly Speaking, live, 2 hours long, starting at 6 a.m. on WYDC TV Big Fox. This is History Man. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. Let's go through a few comments from viewers. It's a great idea to put Trump on Mount Rushmore, the president that saved America. Thank you very much. Here's a comment from Ken, and this is kind of in reference to something we talked about last week. I thought I would share my wife's latest and possibly the last experience on her Neighbors app. I believe that's Neighborhood app. I think is what it's called. I have it as well. After Trump was inaugurated, she posted a picture of Trump. The pic was similar to his mugshot with a stern look on his face, and she said, "Our 47th president," with hearts behind it. It was taken down after less than 24 hours, and my wife's account was red flagged and blocked for her disrespectful post. The response from other users was staggering, calling my wife names, and one woman said that all Republicans should get a chair and a rope and use it on themselves. None of those posts were flagged or removed. The app has obviously gone from a neighbor helping neighbor app to a Democratic propaganda tool. It's sad that something that was started to help people has been co-opted by the Democrats. My wife has deleted the app. This is just a small sample of what I think we can expect in the next 4 years. The legacy media and the Democrats will make it another 4 years of chaos, lies, and propaganda. Thank you. Ken, comment from a different viewer. Trump is a pretty good negotiator. Maybe he's trying to trade California for Greenland. Maybe. There's a couple of things to get. Oh, yes. The New York Post editorial board is calling for Trump to clean out the partisan rot that has taken over the Justice Department. Bureaucratic partisans be warned. The house cleaning at the Justice Department has begun, and not a moment too soon. On Monday, within hours of President Trump taking office, his team got to work, reassigning at least 15 top careerists at Justice, shuffling them to less influential roles. The switch up, including Deputy Assistant Attorney General George Toscas, a top dog at the National Security Division, apparently deeply involved in the over-the-top raid at Mar-a-Lago in August of 2022. He and others have been sent to the new Office of Sanctuary Cities Enforcement, tasked with challenging local laws that impede vital immigration enforcement. And hard lefties will soon see that as the equivalent of getting your desk relocated next to the boiler in the basement. But it's perfectly honorable work for the nonpartisan civil servants that these people claim to be. Thing is, a lot of them aren't, particularly at the infamous agenda-driven Civil Rights Division, which now stands ordered to suspend most work until Trump pick Harmeet Dillon gets confirmed to run it. The last 8 years have given Trump ample lessons on how deep the rot goes and what a mistake it was not to clean house the first time around. Even before he took office in 2017, deep staters with a political axe to grind, if you remember Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, had gotten busy investigating Russiagate on the basis of absolutely nothing, whipping up a media frenzy that smeared the president as a colluder. That turned out to be nothing but a massive waste of taxpayer money and government resources, but it served its purpose of being a thorn in Trump's side. Meanwhile, one set of FBI hands was sitting on the evidence in Hunter Biden's laptop starting in 2019. Trump can't afford to spend his second term again being sabotaged by shadowy operators ensconced as career civil servants. We talked about this, the nameless, faceless bureaucrats who Politico called on to be kind of a fly in the ointment, to try to hinder the Trump administration. So admitting to this kind of deep state term that Trump uses. And he has a duty to purge justice of thugs happy to play politics and undermine the rule of law. This coming from the New York Post. Notice that the IRS produced whistleblowers over the Hunter Biden cover-up, but no one at Justice spoke out about these abuses, the censorship outrages, the lawfare on Trump, or any other betrayal of the department's mission. So a shakeup in Justice Department leadership can only be a good start. Lots more rot will likely need to go before justice is truly blind to politics and dedicated to serving the law, not those in power. Trump gave a pink slip for WHO, as we know, last week, WHO, World Health Organization, and they're saying it's the first step. This is Betsy McKay. Stick to your guns, Mr. President. WHO's record is a disgrace. WHO was founded to create an international method of sharing data and fighting disease, but when it faced its biggest test, it proved to be a puppet of the Chinese Communist Party, and that's in reference to COVID. Globalists don't think countries matter. One is as good as another. That attitude endangers Americans' health and national security. Let's hope the days of putting globalism ahead of the loyalty to the United States are over. Now, Trump did fire more than a dozen independent inspector generals. The Trump administration has fired about 17 independent inspector generals at government agencies, a sweeping action to remove oversight of his new administration that some members of Congress are suggesting violated federal oversight laws. The dismissal began Friday and were effective immediately, according to two people familiar with the actions. They spoke on conditions of anonymity, to provide details that have not been made public. Neither confirmed the exact number of firings, but an email sent by one of the fired inspectors said roughly 17 inspector generals had been removed. Trump confirmed the move in a conversation with reporters, saying it's a very common thing to do. He said he would put good people in there that will be very good. Now, Chuck Grassley said there might be a good reason the IGs were fired. We need to know that if so. I'd like further explanation from President Trump. Regardless, the 30-day detailed notice of removal that the law demands was not provided to Congress. Lindsey Graham acknowledged the firings violated statutes but shrugged it off. Just tell them you need to follow the law next time, he said. Now, the Trump administration, I like how they put this, swiftly enacts retribution against political enemies. The payback against people who have criticized Trump has ranged in severity, but it's come quickly within the first week back in power. That's with John Bolton's security service, and he was on, I see some of the shows complaining about that. There are plenty of early warning signs that confirm the worst fears of people who were concerned about a second Trump administration and what it would mean for the rule of law. Dave Loffman, a former senior Justice Department official under Republican and Democrat administrations, said the real question remains what checks and balances there will be to prevent the creeping establishment of an authoritarian state in the United States. Let's take a quick phone call. Just same old, same old. Get your last minute questions in. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking.
Attention, Elmaron may lead to vision loss.
If you have suffered vision problems after taking Elmaron to treat bladder pain, call the Hearn Law Firm. Elmaron may be responsible for your vision problems, and you may deserve compensation for your injuries.
If you took Elmaron and now have vision problems, call the Hearn Law Firm at 888-308-3866 right now. You could find out if you qualify in less than 2 minutes. Call 888-308-3866 for your free case review.
Something with a diamond in it.
Diamondback rattlesnake.
It's in the name. Name a low-calorie food you might make your edible underwear out of.
Salmon.
Watch it weeknights. Share it the next day.
Wild cough. Norwegian. Teriyaki.
Sharing the fun. Weeknights on Family Feud.
7 and 7:30 on Big Fox.
The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security and Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. Comment from a viewer: I think we should trade Puerto Rico for Greenland. I think it looks like Trump isn't talking about trades. It just looks like he's going to get Greenland. Tom Cotton and Lindsey Graham disagree with Trump in Trump's nixing of the security detail for John Bolton and Mike Pompeo. Lindsey Graham on Face the Nation saying, I would encourage, or this is Tom Cotton, I would encourage the president to revisit the decision for those people who are being targeted by Iran. I've reviewed the intelligence in the last few days. The threat to anyone involved in President Trump's strike on Soleimani is persistent. It's real. Iran is committed to vengeance against all of those people. Okay. The New York Post editorial board saying similar, that Trump is dead wrong to leave his own ex-officials exposed to Iran's wrath. Secret Service protection on the campaign trail, calling it the right thing to do when in reference to RFK. Plus, Trump himself has been on the wrong end of the assassination scope twice. He should understand better than anyone how important adequate protection is when you're being targeted. Worse, this public move can only encourage Iran to mount operations against a newly vulnerable now, with an eye on displaying its power and weakening Trump. The instinct to get even runs deep in MAGA world. But any salvating advisor telling Trump this makes sense is a fool. Should any of these people suffer an attack, the president will be blamed, and rightfully so. Do the right thing, Mr. President. Put the protection detail back in place now. That's according to the New York Post editorial board. All right, what else do we have? We are out of time. Alex Soros, George Soros' son, says that the MAGA world are bullies and you have to fight back. Bill Maher said that people celebrating the United Healthcare CEO's shooting also push gun control, complain about microaggressions. And so here I am again, feeling like an old school liberal at odds with the new politics of the far left. Because it wasn't that long ago when liberals thought shooting people who don't share your politics was bad, or at least a microaggression. Doesn't pumping someone full of lead verge dangerously close to mansplaining? And what about gun control? When Sarah Palin posted a map with crosshairs on the districts of House Democrats she hoped to defeat in 2010, liberals went nuts. But now vigilantism is okay when it's someone you want dead? And where does all that lead? Both parties having death squads? That was Bill Maher. Stephen A. Smith from ESPN admits he feels like a, we'll say, darn fool for voting for Harris. That's Stephen A. Smith. Kamala Harris, who didn't resonate during the primaries in 2020, couldn't even get to Iowa, suddenly is the Democratic nominee. Then you roll up to the convention in Chicago and everybody is like, she's a rock star. So it's like, how did that happen? Yes, I voted for her. A lot of people voted for her. But in the end, we ended up feeling like fools because we supported it. If you had a primary, the likelihood is that she would not have been the Democrat nominee. Well, we are out of time for today's edition of Frankly Speaking. Thank you to everybody who joined us. We had a great conversation this morning, as we always do, and I really appreciate you being a part of the broadcast. Tongue twist on this Monday morning. Please join us every weekday morning, starting at 6 a.m. for Frankly Speaking, only on WYDC TV. Big Fox, we will see you tomorrow morning, bright and early. I look forward to it already. Have a great day, everyone.
Your tap water is delicious.
I know, right? It's this Culligan Smart drinking water system.
What do you think is going on in there?
I'm smelling a touch of chlorine.
Yeah, I'm detecting some PFAS.
I'm also getting notes of lead.
Perfection.
Sending it up.
Here we go.
Certified to reduce more than 70 contaminants, it's like having your own team of water experts. See the smart difference at Culligan.com.